Hey everybody, this is Matt Shapiro, and I write marginally compelling newsletter, and I tweet as political math. And this is the first of what I hope will be a large series of videos and hopefully some written information about what response looks like in different parts of the country. I found that it's really often very difficult to talk about COVID response because the responses change so quickly, so frequently, and there isn't really a very good standard place to say, oh, well, this place has mask mandates or that place has these restrictions on dining. It's all kind of a hodgepodge. But more than that, it's the restrictions are not something that are being very coherently monitored. And so, it, for example, in the area where I live, we have we're supposed to have only 25% indoor dining, but there are definitely some restaurants, even my own town, that are not doing that. We are supposed to have guidelines around outdoor dining and what constitutes outdoor dining, but it certainly is being flaunted by a number of people, by a number of restaurants. And so there is very little enforcement for the restrictions we do have. I've thought a lot about how we could possibly capture something like that in a way that gives people a real sense of what the COVID restrictions look like in different parts of the country, because they are quite different. Um, and so this is the start of that project. I'll be talking about the place where I live, which is a suburb outside of Seattle in Washington State. I'm going to be covering schools, religious gatherings, restaurants. I have a penchant for movie theaters, and I think it's a really important one to look at because it gives you a sense of the overall um, how the given area has a feel for putting people inside of the same room, closed into a room for a certain amount of time. So that one might seem a little esoteric, but I have a reason. I have a reason for it. So uh, outside of Seattle COVID restrictions, I'm going to start with religious gatherings. Uh, about a week ago, I went to try to find an in-person religious gathering because they're not banned in Seattle. The church that I go to is about to start meeting back up, but we had to stop meeting partly because of COVID, but also because our meeting space is not one that we owned. We were meeting at a high school, and when the high school shut down, they never opened back up for us to meet. And so I felt like that was not a good representative sample of a church they closed down because we didn't really do it for the COVID reasons. So I went out and I had seen a couple churches that looked like they were meeting in person, or I thought they were meeting. They had signs indicating, and I found out that none of them were. They're all meeting virtually. There was one church a few miles from my house that I attended, or I went to, and I saw some people outside and I asked if they were going to be meeting in person. And their response was that there was the English services of the church would not meet in person, but Spanish speaking services would. I got no further information on that. That's all I have. There is one church I do know in our area, which is meeting in person. They're meeting according to the guidelines, 25% capacity, masked indoors, so on and so forth. I guess so on and so forth is not really good. I should be giving all the information, but it's 25% capacity with masks indoors. That church had a complaint lodged against them that they were violating the ordinance, and I have unfortunately very little information I can pass along. Um, they don't think it was someone within the church. They think it was someone who saw that the church was meeting and filed a complaint. And the reason that they think this is probably what happened is because the complaint was specifically about masks, which the church is fairly religious about. They're fairly good about making sure that everybody wears their masks indoors. So that's a suspicion, but it's not really solid information. It's just a guess. So that's religious gatherings. let's see, we do have a mask mandate. Everybody follows it. It is I would say masking is universal indoors for things like grocery shopping. Um, it is if you're outdoors, masking is maybe 25 to 50%. I do a lot of walking and runs, and we've got some pretty big parks nearby. When things were early, our area shut down the parks, and they put up signs basically said nobody come to the parks. They kept threatening to shut down a beach. It's about a half mile from my house, and everybody ignored them. They put some of the areas put up caution tape around the playgrounds, and people just tore that down. So yeah, that I feel like that was a fairly heavy-handed response. Um, any park where you had a gate surrounding it, the gate was locked. Um, at one of the parks that I frequent, they actually installed fencing around the play structure for some time. Because when it became apparent that nobody was listening to them when they told them not to go on the playgrounds. Um, let's see. Other sorts of I'm racking my brain. I'm wandering through. Let's talk about restaurants. Restaurants are supposed to be 25% capacity. Indoor dining is back on, although it seems to be kind of in and out. And so I'm uncertain where that guidance is coming from, if it's coming from the state specifically, or if it's county by county. The indoor dining is supposed to be 25%. Restaurants, especially on the weekends, are fairly are at capacity. There's often a wait if you're trying to get into one of the restaurants. The restaurants that I've seen it's difficult to tell what 25% capacity means, because some of them will have like a main dining area at 50% capacity with every other table, but then we'll block off an entirely other part of the restaurant. Cafes will often have substantially more than 25% capacity. But fast food restaurants do not have any indoor dining whatsoever. They are all entirely takeout and drive-through. Movie theaters are kind of an interesting one to me because I visited my family in Georgia a few months ago, and I was interested in seeing what was going on with movie theaters. I ended up not going because the way the movie theaters were working in Georgia was that they were technically open, but they only had one showing per theater room per day. And it was just at a specific time. And so they had a very limited show of movies, and very limited seating and very limited timing. Strange thing is that here in Seattle, all movie theaters are closed, except you can rent an entire movie theater. And you can rent an entire movie theater for anywhere between $100 and $350, depending on the run of the movie. If, let's say, you wanted to watch the new Tom and Jerry movie that just came out, you could rent a movie theater, and I think that would run you $250 or $350 to get the whole theater. It is mask enforced inside the theater. You can have up to 20 people come. But then you get into these kind of weird situations where you can rent the theater, and then if you buy popcorn and soda, you're essentially buying your way out of masking requirements, because you can sit there with the popcorn and it's considered that you're now eating, and you don't have to have a mask on while you're eating. And so it's a very odd situation. It's almost, I would say it's fairly similar in practicality between Seattle and Georgia, where it's the same thing. Every movie theater is rented out for one showing per day, and I believe they're all deep cleaned in between. The interesting thing is that they may actually be making more money here in Seattle because you can't book a movie theater for another month because they're all booked out. Okay, so movie theaters, religious gatherings, indoor, outdoor masking. And then I want to talk about schools. I think that's probably going to be the last big one. unless something triggers me as I'm talking about that. Our schooling situation is very, very odd here. Um, some districts are back to in-person, but in-person usually means they've split the school into two groups, a group and a B group, and each group meets 2 half days per week. And the idea behind that is that they don't want the kids eating lunch together, and so they only do the mornings. The students will do a morning, and then they will have afternoon classes that they have to do online. And students can choose full virtual as opposed to doing the indoor learning. My school district is supposed to have second and third grade go back. Yeah, second and third grade go back in a week or two, and then fourth and fifth grade go back 2 weeks after that. I'm uncertain if that's going to happen, but when they go back, if they go back, it will be that 2 half days a week model. It would be usually a Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, staggered set. They have already announced that there will be no school whatsoever this year for junior high and high school students. Or no, there will be no in-person classes for junior high and high school students. And they are pointing to the CDC recommendations that say that even after vaccines, you have to stay 6 feet. Yeah, all students must stay 6 feet apart and be masked. The statement from the school district is unequivocally that if that is the case, if that is the guidance going into the fall, there will be no school in the fall. There will be no in-person class in the fall. I'm making no judgments about that here. I have my own opinions, but I'm just trying to convey what is actually happening. Private schools still meet, daycares still meet. It's simply the public schools that have made these decisions and decided to do no in-person classes. Yeah, there's a whole lot of other stuff around that. A lot of students are very frustrated because they're still being charged for music that they're not playing, for gyms they're not using, for chemistry labs that they can't enter. Those are kind of ancillary questions, though. The real big picture concept is that schools are meeting extremely limited capacity, and in many cases not meeting in person at all. That is a fairly, I think that's everything that I've got. Most businesses in my area are tech companies. I live very close to Microsoft campus, close to Facebook and Google and Amazon, and those companies are almost without exception fully remote at this point. And it's my personal opinion. I think that helps a lot of our keep a lot of our numbers down. The fact that we just have such a massive number of employees who are just working fully remote completely at this time. That's it. That's about it. When we go to the malls are open. Indoor malls are open. Almost every store that has almost every store has lines when you're trying to get into the store. The Disney store, the Apple store, the Lego store. I mean, are there other stores in a mall? I don't know. But those ones all have lines trying to get in as they try to keep the number of people inside the store itself at a capacity that I am uncertain if it's set by the state or if it's set by the corporate entity. But there are lines to get in. And that's the situation here. I don't think I've been inside a building that wasn't a restaurant and seen people without masks. The masking is universal, kids and adults. Most people don't bring their kids into stores anymore. And yeah, I think that's a fairly comprehensive assessment of what's been happening in my area. And so I'm looking forward to getting this out and starting to talk to other people and find out where the differences are and how people feel guidelines are being followed or not followed or what the guidelines are. So I'm eager about this project and looking forward to hearing more from other people and discovering what things look like there.